Hi, I'm Brielle Wheeler and I'm going to be doing my TOK presentation for Year 1. Today I'm going to be discussing the root causes of global climate change and the way that language is used, perception is used, and ethics are all affecting the perception of global climate change. When doing research about global climate change in ESS, a lot of the articles and papers and studies we researched on were discussing ideas like greenhouse gases, aerosols, and land use changes as the main causes of global climate change. They also discuss a lot of ideas like the blanket around the Earth, which is just the idea that there's a bubble of greenhouse gases that, when mixed with the heat from the sun, results in a temperature increase on the Earth, resulting in a melt of the ice caps, which then increases the water levels on Earth, and it all works together as a theory that global climate change is a result of the greenhouse gas effect. Another idea that the causes are pollution and domestic waste from factories. And these are the four major chemicals in this process. And a lot of people don't think that it's necessarily that bad when they look at these. Water vapor and carbon dioxide are not very harmful chemicals. I mean, they're in our lives all the time. But when mixed together with methane and nitrous oxide, it creates really deadly chemicals that spill into waters, creating eutrophication problems and animal deaths, which is not very good, and it's seen as one of the causes of global climate change. Now, these ideas are the popular ideas because scientists are backing them up. There's data that is proving this. And the idea that a scientist or a doctor is giving you this information allows us to trust them because of their years of experience and their education in this department. A lot of people believe that that experience equals knowledge and knowledge equals validity. So therefore, we hand our power to them. But to what extent does experience equal validity? To challenge the ideas of these three main causes of global climate change is population growth. It's a lot of times overlooked as the root cause because people forget about us being the contributor to this problem. This is some data that proves and shows that population growth and pollution have a direct correlation between each other. As you can see, population increases right about here, and chemicals and pollution also increases at the same rate as population does. Now, this data can't be trusted either because we don't have 100% proof in anything. Nothing will ever be 100% in data. A lot of times numbers are rounded. There might be some skewed numbers or things like that. But because it's data, we put our faith in this. Because it's a scientist or a doctor, we put our faith into this, allowing us to believe that it is the case, that these are the causes of global climate change. Also, again, the language used in this makes us believe that this is the case. The language, the names of the doctors, the name scientists, and everything like that, all lead us to believe that this is something we can trust. This leads me to the question, to what extent does language affect perception? The way we perceive the Earth and the global climate change is affected greatly by the language we use, by labeling things accurate data and labeling things doctors and experimental trials and things like that. That leads us to believe that that's the truth. I have more examples of how language is used and how it affects people's perception a lot. For example, this is a great TED Talk. It's called Grammar, Identity, and the Dark Side of the Subjunctive. And it's about how Vietnam does not have the subjunctive or the indicative, and how this affects the way that they perceive the world because they lack the idea of what if and should have, and the lack of the what if and should have really challenges them to see their futures and see their pasts, which it really doesn't, it's really not a negative thing not to have to dwell on your past, not to have to dwell on the should haves of life, but it's really challenging for them to see the what ifs, to see what their future holds. Now, it does keep them from dreaming, but it allows them to be present thinkers and really helps them in the world. Another example of how language affects the people of the world is in the food industry. The food industry thrives on the language they use to sell their product. For example, organic and natural are two completely different things, but if I were to ask anybody on the street, they would think that organic and natural are the same thing and that eating natural is healthy. And it is, but you don't really know what the definition of organic is. This shows really good examples of how organic doesn't allow GMOs or anything that is a growth hormone or pesticides, where natural allows all of that. And in my book, that's not really natural. It also shows that organic food has to have a lot of policies about regulation of quality, where natural doesn't. Now this affects the people's perception a ton, because when you go in and you see something in the grocery store that says natural, you're going to want to buy that because you're going to think that it's better for you. But lithium's natural, methane's natural, and I don't want to eat that. But the lack of a stable, solid definition and the lack of knowledge of the word natural affects the way that people buy and the way they perceive the products. Now, is using the word natural ethical? Is placing that on a food item natural? Placing the word natural on a food item, is that ethical? I don't think it is, because the people they lack the knowledge of the word, and I don't think that's very ethical to use the people's lack of knowledge to sell a product. One of my last examples is how the UN is changing their wording and changing the usage of genocide. There's a lot of miscommunication between how the word genocide should be used and what actually a genocide is, according to the UN. And instead of using genocide more often, they're reducing their usage and calling a lot more of the conflicts acts of genocide, which means they don't have to react and they can stay isolated from it. Where if it's called a genocide, the UN has to react and put people in to help reduce the conflict. And this labeling these conflicts genocides is increasing ethical tensions and governmental breakdown, and it's resulting in more conflict because they're calling it a genocide when it truly isn't. The way people are perceiving and the ethics behind genocides are really, really hard to understand if you're not somebody who knows a lot about the definition of a genocide or works for the UN. These are the basic things that must be a part of the conflict to call it a genocide. They must be killing members of a group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, inflicting group like physical destruction, and forcibly mistreating children. And this must be happening in a mass amount. If it's just a little bit or one of these is happening in a large amount, it's not a genocide. It needs to all be happening at once and large amounts. And that's what's affecting the definition of genocide. People look at these and think, oh, there's people killing each other. Well, yes, it is a genocide, but if it's in a large amount, it is truly a genocide and the UN must act. The definitions are all messed up and confusing. And this is, okay, this all brings me back to how language, ethics, emotions, and faith all affect the way people see and perceive the world, their choices, and their pasts and futures. And I think that that really does answer the question, to what extent does the use of language affect perception? We are constantly affected by the world around us, by the language they use, by the way they advertise, and the media all the time. Thank you.